May I suggest that it might be these words: adults, behold your children. Children, behold your adults. For we all fit into one or both of those categories. And if there is one thing this virus quarantine, this lockdown has taught us, it is that we are responsible for each other. We used to live, in a world of radical disconnect, according to race, gender, age, social class, education, religion. But we now inhabit, as no other time in history, a global connection that provides an opportunity to prepare to become parent and child, sister and brother, grandparent and grandchild, in a world of shared focus. These words, woman, behold your son, and son, behold your mother, in addition to their literal and specific meaning to these holy people in sacred text, take on an additional meaning for us in our setting. They model a relationship for us as real as the one Jesus created between his mother and his beloved disciple. And the same words create for us an unprecedented invitation. May this image, these words, be our inspiration for Resurrection Sunday and for the weeks to come.
The fifth word. Later, knowing that everything had now been finished, and so that scriptures would be fulfilled, Jesus said, I am thirsty. A jar of wine was there, so they soaked a sponge, put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. In John chapter 4, we read Jesus' response to being denied water by a Samaritan woman. He says, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Was Jesus' request for water driven by real thirst, or was it merely an icebreaker to start a conversation with the Samaritan woman? Did Jesus even get the water he was asking for? John never tells us, as he seems more concerned about the theological and ideological discussion that ensues. But we are left with no doubt at all that both the water and the thirst that matter here are all metaphorical. So the temptation is rather high to make the I thirst of the cross, together with its responsive wine vinegar, another metaphor. John certainly aids this convenient approach by making it a box-ticking exercise. We are left with a Jesus who may or may not be really thirsty, but is more interested in using this cry for thirst to fulfill the scriptures. But what if the thirst was real? Certainly the soldiers thought so. In response to the cry, they shared their ration of wine with this enemy of the state, formerly crucified as a heretic against the religion of emperor worship and a rebel against the rule of Rome. The suffering on the cross triggers a human and humane response, a non-metaphorical response to a non-metaphorical cry that transcends both theology and political ideology. In the opening of On Becoming Human, Ross Snyder starts by declaring, this is a book about becoming human, something we are always about, but never finish, something we always imperfectly realize. we continue to go off on detours, even demonic campaigns, but always there is a thrust toward it from within, the pulsing of humane culture and from within us. We are fundamentally conceived to find life rather than death, fullness rather than emptiness. In being human, John DeGruchy reminds us of how moments of crisis awaken us to the full recognition of our common humanity and how experiences of suffering override our differences. He reminds us that Jesus came not that we may become divine, but rather that we may become even more of what we were created to be, more human. And in this respect, the soldiers of Rome embark on this path as the first converts of this non-metaphorically thirsty, suffering, and dying Christ. May this crisis we are all living through now hold in our homes, for those with homes, this COVID-19 suffering with its hourly ticking up of the number of the dying. May it help us to transcend all differences, including those of ideology, religion, and class, as we become more human. In I Thirst, Christ invites us to embrace our suffering and that of others, allowing it to lead us home. Amen.
Su claridad nunca es oscurecida, y sé que toda luz de ella es venida, aunque es de noche.
It is finished. A final phrase and then an ending. The finish line of a life. The Book of Common Prayer reminds us that in the midst of life, we are in death. In this final moment of Jesus' life, we are caught up in the spectacle of death, as witnessed by the living who are passing by. This death has political intent. It serves to remind the living of their vulnerability and their own fears of death. A visceral reminder that we can kill you too. No one ever thought that the dangerous memory of this small death would over time stretch around the globe, shaping it in new ways. In this time of COVID-19, we again encounter the public spectacle of death on a global scale. Statistics of death hit our screens daily with numbers by age, by country. We are positioned within its risks. Again, we encounter the politics of fear and the dangers of panic. We cling to cobwebs of control. Who will save us? What will have the power to turn the tide on our death toll? Or we face a politics of denial, of eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die, by those made desperate by hunger or despairing by circumstance. The Gospel of John tries so hard to explain these specific words and this death of Jesus away. We are presented with Jesus the Superman, triumphantly overcoming the evil figure of death so that we won't have to. But John's well-meaning attempt may have unintended consequences. It draws on the existing scripts of his religious tradition to make sense in new ways of this event. In so doing, he reinforces a long-held belief that death is a curse, a punishment for sin, a form of God-forsakenness. Instead, maybe we can see Jesus as starting an entirely new script through his own body. This script could reimagine God not as the cause of death, the death bringer to whom humans pray, not me, Lord, why me, Lord, but the fellow sufferer within the limitedness of life, the companion on the journey into human vulnerability, a reminder of a truth that everything that begins will one day end. What if these moments invite us into not a bravado that seeks to triumph over our fear of death, but the courage to journey in, through, and with its sobering realities, to admit to ourselves and to others that in the midst of life, we are, all of us, in death.